Koryo Saram, also known as Koreans from the Soviet Union, have found a second home right here in the United States. This is their untold story. When you think of Russian-American culture, you picture Brighton Beach, Brooklyn, with all its cuisine and vibrant culture. But did you know that it's also home to hundreds of Koryo Sarams, Koreans from the Soviet region who immigrated to New York nearly 20 years ago?
Может быть, но я не знаю, я не думаю.
Not everything is lost in translation. Their native tongue is Russian. Their names are multi-ethnic. Food is a fusion of Korean Russian, and businesses are bicultural. In Park Slope, Brooklyn, the All Nations Baptist Church, led by Pastor Leonid Kim, a Koryo Saram, is one of the largest multi-ethnic Russian churches in New York, representing nearly 10 nations, including Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan.
Many Koreans, they won the green card lottery. They are trying to come to America. After Gorbachev and after 2001, 2nd, in Uzbekistan and Russia, it's very, very difficult time for a Korean economic and down, no job, no money, and Koreans start to looking for some place on some country where they could make money.
Both my parents had engineering degrees and they had jobs in engineering, high ranking. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 91, 92, both my parents lost their jobs. And I know it was because of our race, and that's what my dad said as well.
Yulia Kim left Uzbekistan at age 9 with her family in search of better opportunities and settled in Queens, New York.
When we came to the States, I think due to the lack of language, they really struggled, and Korean community is not going to really support us because we're not that Korean. And I think there was always some kind of distrust with Russian communities too, because we're not entirely Russian. Definitely not Uzbek. And so I think for my parents, it was really vital to find people like us.
So what's the backstory behind Koryo Saram? How did this population end up in countries like Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and the Soviet region? It's an untold history that dates back as far as the 19th century.
The Koreans started moving to Far East Russia due to bad economic conditions in the 1880s. Of course, in 1910, after the annexation of Korea from Japan, many more Koreans fled the Japanese occupation into that area.
Professor David Chung documented their harrowing exodus in his film, Koryo Saram, The Unreliable People. He exposes the atrocities Joseph Stalin committed on the Korean people, whom he thought were a Japanese threat.
And every Korean, due to their race, was taken out of that area by train, and they were dispersed throughout Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan.
Historians consider it one of the first ethnic cleansings of the 20th century.
There were groups of 40,000 or 30,000 in some areas. They had nothing. They had no buildings. They dug holes to live in the ground, and they survived like that for 2 or 3 years. Many thousands died during the first couple of winters.
Yulia's grandparents were part of Stalin's deportation. They were on the ghost trains, a death sentence.
They were given like 24 hours to basically evacuate and take something like these ghost trains or cargo trains, and they were basically shipped off to what is now Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan.
Those who survived were stripped of their Korean heritage and forced to farm barren lands in the Russian region.
My grandparents grew up in severe poverty. Like, I had no clue until a conversation I had recently, but you know, you would share one pair of shoes, or you didn't know when you were going to eat sometimes.
This devastating chapter in history remains hidden as survivors try to erase their memories of deportation and ethnic cleansing.
Through conversations with my parents, I realized that they were a little bit hesitant to share some parts of their history, and I would really have to press and ask, well, why or where.
But scholars like Professor Chung are ensuring their stories get told. And the next generation of American Koryo Sarams are keeping their culture alive in America.
And I think in some ways, Russian culture is not as emotional, I would say, as American culture. I dive deep into my emotions, but I think my parents almost had to back off from that and process things differently.
For Asian American Life, I'm Tinabeth Pina.